Surprising reversal from the House Ethics Committee, which will give the public a chance to see the report of their years-long investigation into former Republican Congressman and failed Attorney General nominee Matt Gaetz. Two sources familiar with the matter told NBC News that the Ethics Committee voted earlier this month to release the report. The committee was previously deadlocked across party lines to release the report, with House Speaker Mike Johnson lobbying the committee to kill the report. The committee's findings will be made public as early as this week and will conclude their investigation into allegations against Gaetz, which include whether he engaged in sexual misconduct and illicit drug use, accepted improper gifts, gave special favors to people with whom he had personal relationships, and obstructed the House probe. Joining our conversation, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale. Mark and Michael are still with us. All right, Ali, how did this all happen, and what are you hearing about the reversal?
Well, look, we know the Ethics Committee meets regularly, and we also knew that they left in early December deadlocked on what they were going to do with the Matt Gaetz referral. So the fact that they came back to this and held yet another vote where they ultimately came out with a decision is not entirely shocking. The fact that we know in advance that they're releasing the report is what's surprising about this, because this is typically a committee, and many of your guests know this, that is shrouded in secrecy. They all promise in bipartisan fashion not to leak or talk about what happens in the room. And so the fact that a few weeks ago we were not just knowing when they were going to be meeting and what the topic of their meeting was, but the fact that we knew from the chairman himself that he was deadlocked on this issue of what to do about the Gaetz investigation and report that they had drafted, that's notable. He also, the chairman, included many details about the fact that, well, maybe the report wasn't done at that point. Maybe that's why they had to double back. And then we saw the Democratic ranking member, Susan Wild of Pennsylvania, come out and say that she wanted to make clear that deadlocked did not mean an agreement in the room to not release this report. That was really interesting. It gives us insight into the way that members were thinking about their role on the Ethics Committee, but it's also what we never get from the Ethics Committee. So there's a lot that's very spoiling to those of us who want transparency in the process. They want to know what's going on in these committee rooms. And it's also something that sort of speaks to the way that happenings in the Trump era tend to fray traditional bipartisan agreements, even around committees like these, that typically don't operate in this fashion, but now are because of the stakes and because of the landscape. So now we know we're going to be getting the report at some time by the end of this Congress. I do think, and I know we'll talk about this, that the government funding craziness that has unfolded in the last 2 hours is probably going to impact the timing of when this report comes out, because it seems like the Ethics Committee folks would like to release the report, but they'd like to do it as members are getting out of town. That makes sense for a lot of political reasons, but that timing could shift if Congress finds itself in a shutdown posture and thusly on an extended schedule for how long they're staying in Washington.
So, Mark Elias, we'll talk about that CR in just a minute, as Ali so astutely assumed. But I want to talk with you as someone who really has an eye on accountability and has sought accountability through legal routes. What you think, what you make of the House Ethics Committee choosing to release this report publicly?
Look, to me, this is not that complicated. Matt Gaetz is what he is, and the Republicans in the House were just as happy as the Democrats originally to release the report, because they didn't want to have to answer for him or stand up behind him. Then what happened is Donald Trump appointed him to be the Attorney General, and all of a sudden the Republicans all fell into line. And the Republicans in the House were going to protect Matt Gaetz at all costs, because that's what Donald Trump wanted them to do. Then Matt Gaetz dropped out, and they reverted back to, okay, let's release the report, except with the caveat, we don't want to embarrass our members by having them to answer questions about this report. You know, as Ali said, for understandable political reasons. Let's be clear. The Democrats, they don't have any political reasons to not want to talk about the Gaetz report. The people who are worried that this will be released while they're still around, the Republicans are going to have to explain why it is they were willing to protect this guy for so long and wanted to originally stymie this report. And the only reason they were wanting to do that is because they're sycophants and protectors of Donald Trump. I just want to add just 15 seconds of personal privilege, to the last segment. The real heroes of the story are the Michael Steeles. It's easy for a Democratic lawyer to say, that what is going on right now is wrong. It is hard for the former RNC chair to do that. And he is one of the heroes of this story. And so I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that.
Michael Steele, unlike yours, truly knows how to take a compliment. So I will ping it over to him, because while I agree with Mark's assessment that this whole thing is not complicated, I bet if you were Speaker Mike Johnson, who pushed hard to keep this report from coming out, Michael, then you disagree because this is complicated for him.
It's not complicated for the speaker. It's whatever Donald Trump told him to do. This is you're not talking about John Boehner. You're not talking about even Newt Gingrich here. You're talking about the current speaker, who has shown his proclivities towards insurrection as one of the architects of that effort in 2021. And since then, just aligning the House with whatever Donald Trump wants. What this whole thing tells me is a secret ballot, matters in Washington. If there had been a secret ballot in impeachment 1 or impeachment 2, Donald Trump would have been long. His ass would have been out of town a long time ago. We would not be here right now with this. But because of the way the rules are set up, and because those members who know what the results of a secret ballot would be, they fought against those efforts during the impeachment. They could have very easily had that impeachment vote as a secret ballot. In this committee, this was the safe harbor. This was the space they could all retreat to, and no one would know how the members voted. And guess what? The report is being released, despite the fact that the speaker tried everything in his power to prevent it from being released, which, by the way, is a violation of their rules, because he's not supposed to do that.
All right, Ali Vitale, 1, tell us if any of our analysis is flying in the opposite direction of your deeply sourced reporting. And 2, I want to get back to the CR. You have Trump signaling his opposition to the budget deal. Talk me through what happens now.
Well, for Mike Johnson, with friends like these, I mean, that's always been the story of Republican speakers these last 2-3 years. But certainly for Johnson, I think what you're right about saying in regards to the Ethics Committee, I know it's not complicated from the front of a lot of Republicans dislike Gates, a lot of Democrats dislike Gates. I got the sense that many of them would have been more than fine with this report getting out there. However, it would have gotten out there. So there's a lot of happy people in bipartisan fashion on the House side of this building who want to see this Gates report out there. You guys are absolutely right about that. I also think the piece for Johnson is he's now watching a committee that is notoriously independent and tries not to be influenced by leadership actively show that they are willing to say, I see that the speaker said he doesn't want this report released about Gates because he's a former member. We're just not going to listen to that. I think that's an important thing that might give some indications about the profile that Johnson cuts within this Republican conference. And then that translates to the way that the government funding battle is unfolding. And in the last hour and a half, it really does feel like there is just shell shock here on Capitol Hill because of the way that not just conservatives, who we always expected to be upset about the plan that Johnson put together, because it's not just a continuing resolution that funds the government till March, it includes disaster relief, but it also includes a whole bunch of other stuff. And the more stuff that they put on this, the more angry conservative members got, both on the House and Senate side. These people were always the same people that were never going to vote for this continuing resolution, but this has always meant problems for Johnson, especially because a few weeks from now, when everyone comes back from the new year and from the holidays, he's got to try to get reelected speaker with even thinner margins than he had this last time around. So those margins are coming into play, but the president-elect also came in from over the top and basically dunked on his top guy in the House, saying he didn't like the plan that Johnson put together and complicating the entire process, forcing Republican leadership to start from scratch on Wednesday evening when the government shuts down at midnight on Friday. They're scrabbling together, trying to put together a plan, but there is no firm plan at this point. My text messages right now from Republicans and Democrats are basically just what is going on. They don't have a sense of where this goes next. The most likely plan B is that they end up doing a clean continuing resolution and just pairing it with disaster relief. That's certainly something that's been floated that conservatives would be happy with. But at the same time, again, these are the same conservatives that rarely, if ever, vote for continuing resolutions. So Johnson may not even earn them anyway, but they are the ones that sent him back to the drawing board with the help of the president-elect.